Dr. Ho, thanks so much for joining us here at Pi Magazine today.
It's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Could you explain a little bit what ForeseeHome is all about?
I sure can. ForeseeHome is a home monitoring device for patients with age-related macular degeneration who are at risk for conversion from the dry form of the disease to the more advanced wet form of the disease.
Great. And why is it important to monitor visual changes, especially in intermediate dry AMD patients?
It's important to monitor your vision when you have intermediate dry AMD because you are at potential risk for development of wet macular degeneration. And the real issue and the real key to ForeseeHome is that it catches problems earlier. And when you catch the disease earlier, you start with better vision. We know that most patients in the real world present with a certain level of vision decline. In the ForeseeHome AREDS 2 study, that was the pivotal study that allowed commercial approval for ForeseeHome, those patients were caught with good vision, about 87% of the time with 20/40 or better vision. So catching a disease earlier with this at-home testing technology, AI-enabled, artificial intelligence-enabled strategy is really important for patients with at-risk intermediate dry AMD.
And so could dry AMD patients also have undiagnosed wet AMD?
They could. They could have undiagnosed wet AMD, and what happens is we only see the patients intermittently. So for, let's say, every 6 months or every 12 months, for the patients that are a little bit computer savvy, I would say, a little bit more comfortable with technology, ForeseeHome is definitely a helpful strategy for detecting the conversion of dry to wet AMD early.
I understand a study was performed finding 306 eyes that converted from dry AMD to wet AMD over the period of 9 years. Could you explain those results a little bit further?
Sure. So the ForeseeHome real-world study that we're presenting at the American Society of Retina Specialists meeting speaks to those eyes that were converted and detected in the Notal Vision Diagnostic Center. So these were patients post FDA approval, commercial use, who had detection of CNV based on ForeseeHome. The original ForeseeHome data was based on about 80 patients, 80 subjects in the AREDS 2 vitamin study. This is a larger data set, and whether or not real-world data replicates clinical trial data there's always a disconnect there. It turns out that the real-world data for ForeseeHome derived and presented in this study mirrors very much so the findings in the AREDS 2 home study, and therefore that's good news. We're catching disease earlier in patients. When we catch disease earlier, the patients do better.
I recall that ForeseeHome identified a number of these conversions, something like more than 60%. Is that right?
Yes, ForeseeHome detected conversions in the real world about 69% of the time, while usual patient symptoms and office visits detected CNV 31% of the time. So there was a higher detection rate with the ForeseeHome, which kind of which jives with the data set that shows that 81% of the patients in this real-world study had 20/40 vision or better upon presentation. Again, catching disease early with the ForeseeHome and the motivated patient allows them to do better over time.
So to summarize, functional vision was maintained more often in a group whose conversion was identified by ForeseeHome. Is that right?
Absolutely. We know that the biggest determinant of how you do with vision at, let's say, 1 year or 2 years time in new onset wet age-related macular degeneration is not what drug you're using, not how frequently you're using it, but what the starting baseline vision is. So again, catching disease early, having that ability to use ForeseeHome at home in between office visits allows that detection to happen for the patient that's able to use the ForeseeHome device.
And by the way, ForeseeHome is part of that hot topic of telehealth right now, correct?
Absolutely, telehealth. We've experienced across all of medicine delays in care, which is exactly what ForeseeHome aims to reverse, which is early detection. And when patients are, let's say, in a pandemic, not motivated to come into an office, the ForeseeHome gives you a good safety net. It acts as a great goalie for those that are using it consistently.
Well, Dr. Ho, thanks so much for joining us today here at PI. We've been extremely blessed to have you on, and stay safe out there in Philadelphia area.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, and likewise to you. Stay safe.